Oh, damn. Are you kidding me? Somebody's calling? Go away. We're recording.
Inside this room, all of my dreams become realities, and some of my realities become dreams.
What in the wide, wide world of sports is going on here? Alive! It's alive! It's alive!
You are listening to The Wilder Ride, getting wilder by the minute. Here are your hosts, Alan Sanders and Walt Murray.
Welcome back, everyone, to The Wilder Ride, getting wilder by the minute, a podcast where we break down and celebrate the films of Gene Wilder 1 minute at a time. We are breaking down Young Frankenstein in our inaugural season, and I'm one of your hosts, Alan Sanders.
And I'm Walt Murray.
One of our other hosts.
One of our other hosts. Sorry.
Who are you?
I have no idea.
And joining us again from her fitness studios, Susan Delmonico. Welcome.
Thanks for having me again.
I appreciate having you here. It's nice to get a female perspective in a movie like this. Before we get into today's minute, one of the things that we often hear is sometimes there are movies that get labeled as, well, that's guy humor, or that's funny for a guy, or that's not, ladies wouldn't necessarily like this kind of movie. You said, as we were rounding up guests, this is one of your earlier comedies that you remember from your childhood.
Oh, yeah. There are lines from this that I have quoted ever since I saw it the first time. It's just hilarious to me.
Didn't you played basketball in high school?
Yeah.
I think you told me a story about the whole walk this way line.
We used to come out of the locker room and we made sure we dribbled in unison and they would sing walk this way. We usually ended up losing, so it was kind of anticlimactic, but it was fun in the beginning.
I mean, Walt made a point of saying that there are lines he quotes and still to this day uses. Besides the walk this way, do you find yourself doing something similar?
Oh, yeah. Just the pronunciation of the names, Frankenstein, I will just change things. I just think it's funny. My kids look at me oddly, but I think it's funny.
Yeah, they don't get it. Well, they haven't seen it. Although they're probably going to be really interested in listening to the podcast.
Sure, yeah.
I know we had a pre-millennial in here last week, and he made the comment. He said, I was a little worried. Sometimes older movies that an older generation might find funny, a younger generation may not. And Walt said that he found himself laughing a lot.
Yeah, and I think this is, we've mentioned this before, that this isn't a movie that has jokes that are kind of stuck in 1974. It's not political. There's no social commentary per se in this. It's just good comedy.
Well, we're going to break down minute number 12 here. And in minute number 12, we start off with Dr. Frankenstein still holding the scalpel in his hand. When we last left yesterday, he was making a comment about you have more luck reanimating this scalpel. And he continues at the very beginning of this minute, than mending a broken nervous system. And it ends with Max Detweiler from The Sound of Music coming down to deliver a very ominous sounding name of his great-grandfather. So let's go ahead and start at the very beginning. He is in the midst of that conversation with Brainy Smurf and the class. He's got the scalpel in hand, and it's obvious he is very animated about this particular moment with this student.
Yeah, dare we say, his buttons have been pushed, and he is close to coming unglued.
In fact, this is that line where, at the very beginning, the kids want to go, but your grandfather goes, my grandfather's work was doo-doo!
A classic line.
I love that because here he is, this educated scientist, doctor, and he uses the clinical term of doo-doo. I think it's awesome.
Now, did you notice very slowly, and this would actually concern me because now I'm fearing for him. He changes the scalpel where he's got it in his hand like you would use to show somebody to now he's turned it around like he's going to stab somebody.
Yeah, he has had enough.
I mean, he's at wit's end, and It's early in the movie.
Well, and you can see the temperature of the room starts to change, too, because when he says, my grandfather's work was doo-doo, you hear the gasp, you see the students kind of looking at each other. It's becoming obvious that something unusual is going on here.
This is the first time I think the class itself, the audience, the students, realizes, okay, this is escalating. This is now getting a little out of hand. It was fun to watch one-on-one with the student, but now you almost sense the rest of the medical students are starting to feel a little uneasy.
Mm-hmm.
And
uncomfortable.
Very uncomfortable. And they all gasp when he says about the doo-doo. Now, is it gasping because he said the word doo-doo?
I would doubt that's the one that got him.
I mean, I'm just wondering. I was like, did you hear what he said?
He said doo-doo. He said the D word.
Yeah. Even in 1974, I would venture to guess they've probably heard worse.
No, I get that. I mean, it is the 70s, and certainly there's probably been a lot of foul language that would be for these students, the free love and everything coming out of the 60s into the 70s. But I almost get the sense that they hadn't heard him use language like that before.
Yeah, well, and he has done a lot to develop the scientific professional. I'm a medical doctor, and this seems to be that this kid has punched his buttons enough that they're starting to see a little insight into who he is and what's bubbling under the surface for him.
Could it be they're gasping because even if his grandfather was crazy, are they gasping because his grandfather was a scientist and he's taking all his work and saying it's doo-doo?
Could be. I almost think it's funnier if they're, of all the things that he's having said right now, it's the fact that he didn't use some scientific phrase. He chose the phrase you would tell 4-year-olds.
Right.
Or when you're walking your dog, okay, go doo-doo. Come on, make a doo-doo for me. Make a doo-doo. Only he's basically, like you said, calling his grandfather's work and everything he's done. But the way I look at it, that's what I think. This would be a good poll to put on our Facebook page.
It sure would.
Are they gasping because he's making fun of his grandfather or because they've never heard him use the word doo-doo?
Well, and we keep talking about when we've been in classes with the Brainiac who's got to prove how smart he is. But we've also been in meetings and stuff where things kind of start to go a little weird and you get that group tension that starts to build and everybody's kind of like, oh, what's going on here? And the first opportunity for any kind of laugh or anything to break that tension, comes in. I guess in some ways, even though he's not intending it that way, because he's really starting to come apart, the class kind of grabs onto that. And you can tell the class knows that something really weird is
the
going
collective
down.
gasp, we don't see them. We just hear it.
Yeah.
It's just the audio recording. And
there are a couple of people that look back and forth at each other when we look at the gentleman at the back of the room.
Yeah, there is it when we do a cut scene where it does go back and you do see that they've kind of got that, darting their eyes or, what's going on here. And then after the gasp of the doo-doo, now everyone's watching him. There's no way they didn't know he's got a scalpel in his hand, right? Because he makes a point of saying, look at this scalpel, right? Last minute he said you'll have more chance reanimating this scalpel than you would reanimating the dead or mending the nervous system. Then all of a sudden they gasp just a second ago at the word doo-doo, yet he plunges this scalpel all the way into his thigh bone. Dead silence.
No response.
Now, so is everyone just in shock or did they miss it?
Well, he's trying to hide it, so could they possibly have missed it? Because he immediately tries to cross his leg and cover it up. But this scene does bother me in the sense that I know he's pretending it didn't happen, trying to hold back, but I still think that there should have been more reaction on his face. Maybe just the widening of his eyes, even if he's trying to keep it together. But I think it was too subtle.
I see where you're coming from with this, because everybody, so far we've each had moments where there's things that just bug us. To me, this is just comedic genius for me, because when he plunges it, there's that pause where you almost get the sense of going, did I? Then he looks down, takes his hand, looks real, covers it right back up. I just did what I thought I did. I almost think he's in shock, like he doesn't feel the pain just yet. He's aware something's not right.
Yes.
But it hasn't quite registered yet. But then as the pain does start to fit in, he puts his leg over and he's like, Wes, dismissed.
And he has his hand over his mouth. And
and then he puts his hand like, oh dear God, this hurts. This hurts so bad.
Well, and I think he's not only trying to cover the pain, but he's also trying to regain his composure.
Right.
Yes.
Because he knows that the veneer has just cracked. And people are starting to see what's going on inside.
Does he do this, Susan? Now, this is a guy question to a girl. Does he do this because he doesn't want to let Brainy Smurf know that he got him angry to the point where he would do something dumb like this?
I think
is he hiding it from the class or is he hiding it from Brainy Smurf?
I think he's hiding it from the class. At this point, he has a scalpel plunged into his leg. I don't even think he knows who Brainy Smurf is anymore.
Yeah, it's a little hard to cover.
I keep thinking of that scene in Pet Detective too, when they throw the spears at him in his thighs, and he's dancing around. He's like, "It's in the bone, it's in the bone," and he ends up getting this little guy so laughing at him that they decide they won't kill him. Like that's like it's his way out. But there was a something. Obviously, we do a lot of research before we get ready for these, and I had read somewhere where someone said, "Oh, this was totally improv, and he accidentally stabbed himself." But that was very quickly found to be untrue. That somebody was just, "Hey, it's the internet. You can say anything, right?" If you are paying really close attention, you could see either Gene Wilder really works out his right quad, and that's it, or there's definitely some large padding that's right there on top of his quad muscle.
Right. The muscle doesn't have sharp angles like that.
You don't have like where it kind of like bulges.
Right,
I mean, maybe
yeah,
he
it
only
doesn't
does
work
like
like
one-legged wall sit. You know, the other one's just kind of sitting there on a lazy Susan.
You
not
still
lazy
don't
Susan,
have
but on
square muscles.
What do you call those things on that rock back and forth that you put in front of a glider? The little pedestal.
Ottoman,
something like a rockable ottoman.
It looks like he's got a side of bacon in his leg.
I gotta ask this, okay, because I'm involved with film, but he doesn't just slowly. It looks like he's ready to ram that scalpel through the backside of his leg.
Yeah, he rams that thing hard.
I'm wondering, and Susan, you're a personal trainer. If somebody wanted to run a scalpel through their thigh, what would you put in place to stop it?
Well, I think a block of wood would be a little too hard. It would have to be something between like styrofoam and wood. I'm not sure.
I'm wondering
what
if it's really like a dense foam with maybe a metal back, just in case, because that'd be my worry.
Right.
Although when I'm watching,
or
and
maybe
I get
it is
this,
a slab of bacon.
Maybe.
I mean, that would stop it.
That would do it.
I wonder if they did the whole Hitchcock thing where Mel Brooks closed his eyes and said, okay, stab into a bunch of these melons and I'll pick the one that sounds like stabbing into a person, like when Psycho. He basically had them stab and Alfred Hitchcock just had his eyes closed and said, oh, that's the sound I want. I wonder if they did that. Did Mel Brooks just close his eyes? We'll have to ask him if we ever get him on.
Which would be awesome.
You know, when it comes to the sound design, how did you decide to make that sound of the scalpel, which, by the way, is extraordinarily sharp and would probably not make a whole lot of noise.
I love the lack of blood, too.
Yeah, you don't see anything right there. And
no blood, no.
And nothing comes out later.
No
besides
screaming.
The scalpel.
Well, and I forget sometimes, now in the days of CGI where they can do a lot of things digitally where they, might not even have a scalpel in his hand if they shot it today. That's a real scalpel. And he is doing a real actual stunt. And that could have gone really wrong.
Yeah, it could have, which makes me wonder, like you said, styrofoam with some type of metal backing, so it couldn't go all the way through to prevent that from happening.
Now, we noticed the class gasped at doo-doo, says 0 at stabbing himself, and as he crosses his legs and takes his moment to compose himself, he says class dismissed and gets a standing ovation. Are they giving him an ovation, Walt, because, wow, that's a tough guy, or is it thank God class is over?
I'm going to go with the thank God class is over.
Or it could just be a respectful, this is what we do. We're so impressed by your lecture that we're...
Oh, yeah. It was brilliant. Didn't even pay attention to the fact that you've just, impaled yourself on a scalpel.
And Brainy Smurf got the best of you.
And
I would
we're outta
clap
here.
for that.
I certainly, we're done. So maybe it's a combination of all three. They're impressed with his answers. They're impressed with the fact that he could stab himself and sit there without a scream or anything. And the fact that class is over.
Yeah, it's always a good thing when class ends.
We'll go with that. So as the class begins to leave, we see this gentleman from the back of the room that we've playfully identified as Uncle Max, who tries to get all of the Von Trapp children into that concert that the dad does not want to. Christopher Plummer saying, no, my kids do not perform in public unless it's for my Baroness friends and stuff, then that's okay. Otherwise, no, we're not going to have them go out into the festival. But we've got Max von Detweiler here making his way toward the professor, who still has the scalpel firmly in his thigh. And no, so you said this scene bothers you. You said, here's this thing now plunged in his thigh. He doesn't really scream or anything. Guy walks up. I think this lends to just how important it is that he does not link his current name with his family name. Because even with it plunged in his thigh, this stranger walks up and goes, Frankenstein? And he says, Frankenstein. And then plucks the scalpel out. So what did you think about, that he's more worried about making sure his name is pronounced the way he wants it before taking the scalpel out?
What was your question?
What do you think about that? That he would be more worried about his name?
Oh, I think that's awesome to focus on that no matter what, he is so against Frankenstein that he's in that much pain that he's going to make sure he corrects the pronunciation.
Yeah, and he's really kind of trying to regain his dignity, regain his composure, and here somebody else walks up and says, Dr. Frankenstein.
Yeah.
Now, Susan, you deal with human anatomy to an extent, with muscles and, the proper way to flex and bend and lift so people don't hurt themselves. Does the thigh muscle make this sound when you pull the knife out of it? Does a popping sound?
Well, since I've never actually jammed a scalpel into my muscle to find out? I honestly can't say, but I am going to venture a guess and say, no, it does not make that sound.
What about you? You've had a history with your father in law enforcement. You're a private detective by day. When sticky objects come pulling out of flesh, does it make a popping noise?
Oh, I would say it probably does. As a lifelong klutz, I'm just going to guess and say, yeah, there's probably that, one of those spinny whistle things, and a zinger.
I mean, even if it's in the bone, I don't.
Well, I'll tell you, if it was me, you wouldn't know over the screaming what sound it made.
the blood curdling scream.
I'm tough, but I would be crying like a baby at that point.
Well, let me ask you this question. It's bad enough plunging the scalpel into your thigh. I don't think I'd be able to pull it out. At that point, is it going to hurt worse if I pull it out? What do I do?
The more I look at this, the more I think it actually is in the bone. Because it doesn't move.
It doesn't move. And he really
wiggling.
does. He kind of has to jerk it out.
It does. It's just like, it wrenches it out. And it makes that popping noise. Well, we have our elderly gentleman, our elderly statesman. You said a couple of shows ago in his bohemian attire. Mm-hmm. And he walks up and introduces himself as Herr Fockstein, who has been sent here to present something from his great-grandfather, Beaufort von Frankenstein. And he goes, really, he likes pronouncing that name with a sense of dun, dun, dun.
He loves it. And he also made the point that he traveled 5,000 miles to get there. So he really is driving home the importance of whatever he's got.
Well, I think that when he's saying that, is he's so dedicated to the great-grandfather? And did he work since he's doing this for the great-grandfather, did he do it for Victor? Did he work for Victor? And where does his allegiance lie? And that goes back to what you had said earlier about, is he happy that Frederick doesn't want to get into the reanimation, or is he upset? So where does his allegiance lie? Obviously, he's been with the family for a long time.
Well, funny you should bring that up, because I happened across the third revision of the script that was worked on by Gene Wilder and Mel Brooks for Young Frankenstein. And we've commented before that they had to really cut a lot of and it's any movies that way. You film as much as you can. You go in, you look at your first rough cut, and you realize, okay, that dragged, that didn't make sense. We can remove this subplot. Because all directors and editors want to make sure the movie is a success, and they want to make sure it flows. But there is about 7.5, almost 8 pages that have been taken out of the very beginning of the movie script. Because in the script, remember how I was really bothered, Walt, about the coffin? Like, who keeps the coffin of a guy who's obviously been dead a long time? Sitting in the fireplace.
I probably laugh every day thinking about how obsessed you are with that coffin being in their living room.
So check this out. Inside that box is actually the will and testament of Beaufort Frankenstein, who was the father of Victor Frankenstein, according to our script here. And the reason we know it's his will is in the script, there are 9 other family members that have been gathered around to hear the reading of the will. And it starts off where the caretaker of the executor of the will puts on a record, and it's the recorded voice of Beaufort, basically reading his last will and testament. And he greets everybody and says, basically, all right, everyone, I've written my last will and testament on my 83rd birthday, but my wishes are that this will not be read until the anniversary of my 100th birthday. Why he couldn't be put in the ground. The coffin had to sit there for 17 plus years until he hit his 100th birthday.
And that answers my question. Why is he just now bringing the last will and testament? The guy must have died a while ago. Why is he just now bringing it to Frederick?
So, again, all this was not in the movie, but was in the script. The voice continues, I am going to completely turn over my estate, my holdings, my wealth, my fortune, everything equally divided among all of you. And they're all super excited. Unless, and they're all sitting there going, unless? And again, according to the script, the guy then says, oh, sorry, the record has to be turned over because it's a 78, so it's so fast. So they have to flip it over for continuation. Unless I have word of a great-grandson whom I have never met, who at the age of this recording was 10 years old and residing in the United States. If by some reason or some miracle, he has become involved or is somehow in the medical field on his own, chose path of medicine, and has somehow made a name for himself. If that's the case, then I will give absolutely everything to my one sole blood heir, my great-grandson. And apparently the executor says, well, we sent a telegram to Frederick Frankenstein, but he said he couldn't make this reading. So all the people gathered say, well, then he's forfeited the will. He's forfeited this, blah, blah, blah. Besides, what does he do for a living? He goes, well, the reason he can't come is he had to give a medical lecture. Yes. What do you mean he had to give a medical lecture? Apparently, he is a renowned surgeon out of Johns Hopkins University in Maryland. And they were like, wait, he's a doctor? Like, yes. And apparently of some renown. And they all start realizing they've lost everything.
Okay, now all of a sudden I'm finding a problem here. Because if he, on his 83rd birthday, there was a 10-year-old boy, well then this was the reading at what would have been his 100th birthday.
17
so
years
that's
later.
17 years later, so that's going to make Frederick 27. Well, he's not 27, unless he aged very, very poorly.
Some people are rode hard, put up wet. Look at Frau Blucher.
And he's not going to be a professor if he just got out of medical school, and at 27, you're not out of medical school for very long. So I don't think he could have been 27, so I'm going to call shenanigans on that whole last will and testament.
Yeah, Hollywood maybe not paying attention to the script. That chronological timeline wouldn't work. The history or the, I don't know what you would call it, the circumstances that it just so happens that he does become a doctor, and it just so happens he is well renowned, and just so happens that he is exactly like Beaufort Frankenstein wanted if he was going to bequeath everything to one person. That part all holds,
right.
But he would have to have been closer to maybe mid-40s rather than late 20s.
Right.
Unless he was a prodigy.
He could have been a prodigy.
But he doesn't look that young either.
No, he does not.
Well, let's remember.
But it's cut out of the script, so it's kind of a moot point.
So yeah, we can argue maybe they would have fixed that on set and changed the time, but at least we know now. Now I understand why the coffin was left, because they didn't want to have to go dig it back out. Why not just leave him let's just leave him in the sitting room for 17 years.
It's a conversation piece.
Absolutely.
It's a place to put your drinks when you've got people over. It's a conversation.
Kind of a wet bar.
If you would like to come over to the coffin, I can fix you a drink.
Please use a coaster. We don't want to get those rings. The fact is that the body was in there for a long time in front of a fireplace. I mean, what are you doing? You cooking, Grandpa? You're keeping him nice and toasty.
Well, and I know he's in a sealed coffin, but you would think there'd be a little bit of a smell that would seep out
Grandpa
of there.
get a little ripe in there.
I guess that eventually does go away when all the biological matter turns into like this, where it's just taunt and just like you've been shrink wrapped in your own skin. But all right, so that scene had been cut out. What I think is also interesting, now that we understand why the coffin was there, we understand why this guy went so far, we now know that everything has been left to the only blood heir that he was aware of, this great-grandson of his. The script actually goes on and shows heir Falkenstein and Frankenstein walking down an alleyway or walking down a street talking, and Gene Wilder's character he's like, I don't know anything about this history. I don't have anything to do with it. I get that, and apparently they threw in the number that it's $100,000, but I'm not interested. I'm getting married in a few weeks. And Gerhard Falkenstein here says, hey, look, we can get this all done in 10 days or less. We just need you to come out there, take possession of the property. We need to have a formal finalization of the will. This won't take very long at all. And in the background, and we find out through the script, there's someone playing a violin, and it changes to the violin melody, the Eastern lullaby that is in the opening title credits, and suddenly that has like an effect on Gene Wilder's character. He's suddenly almost as if, not really hypnotized, but according to the script, it's almost like he's been transported to some other place, and he no longer has control of himself.
Like a subliminal.
Almost like there's something subliminally telling him, you know what, go ahead and do it. Just do it. So it's the same music that has the same effect later on his creature, has the same effect even on him when he's first at his castle. So they had this musical theme come up a few times before the creature, which I thought was interesting script-wise, but they just dropped that whole scene from the final version of the film.
Right. That would have been a neat thing, I think, to have kept in.
Because all we have here is, as this scene ends, is he makes this pronouncement from Beaufort von Frankenstein. And we hear music getting ready to be, and it stops. But so we don't know if the music is going to turn into circus music or if it's going to stay, ominous. But we don't have any sense moving into the next minute that he says yes or no. Obviously, we'll figure that out. But this whole scene where he's trying to still argue, I don't want to go. And all of a sudden, it's this violin in the background. And as Gene Wilder's character finally agrees, I'll meet you at the station, Falkenstein ends up thanking and paying off the violinist.
Well, it is interesting because at the end of the day, this is a comedy. However, there is a distinct plot to it, and this is probably the biggest hole for me over the years is what was it that got him going from I am strictly a scientist, I don't want to be associated with the Frankenstein name, I don't reanimate dead flesh, to, okay, I'll get on a train and go. I mean, there is a gap there.
It's all about the money.
It's all about the money. Yep.
All right, so as we begin to wrap up this 12th minute, anything that you want to add? Anything that you noticed that we didn't cover yet, Walt?
No, but we've got some good tension going into the next minute.
Susan, what about you? Anything else that we wanted to cover? Anything that you happen to have in your notes?
Oh, no, not at all. Nothing. I'm empty.
I'm a blank slate.
Fill me with something. Wait, what?
Okay.
What kind of podcast is this?
All right, well, that's going to wrap up then minute number 12 for us here on the Wilder Ride. I do want to say one more time thank you to the guys Pete and Alex of the Star Wars Minute, StarWarsMinute.com, who created the daily format. And now if you go to moviesbyminutes.com, and that's plural, moviesbyminutes.com, you can get a list of a whole lot of other folks that are doing something similar with different franchises and films that they were near and dear to their hearts, much like Gene Wilder is near and dear to ours.
Well, and we also just want to take a second to thank everybody for following us on Facebook, for going out and rating us on iTunes, making comments there. That is really amazing for us, and it helps other people find us, so we really do appreciate that.
And come back tomorrow for another Wilder Ride, Getting Wilder by the Minute, where we find out, does this pronouncement of the great-grandfather's name have any effect on Frederick von Frankenstein?
No, I think that's where it ends.
The movie's over?
Yeah, movie's done.
Wow, that was a quick podcast.
Well, let's see what happens tomorrow.
Susan, you want to join us again?
Oh, I'm having a blast.
All right, well, we'll meet you same time. This time you bring the donuts.
Okay.
Right.
Great thing for a personal trainer to bring, so.
Yeah, I didn't think about that. All right, bring just black coffee. How about that?
I'll bring the water.
Aw.
Oh, come on. Frankenstein. Okay, let's go.
Oh, I'll bring the beer. Woo.